So we've been looking at some of the works that have become part of recently introduced into the Envisioning Intelligences exhibit. And as some of you know, that is the third decade, will be the third decade of the Places and Spaces exhibit, which went from a decade of science maps to a decade of interactive data visualizations, and then we kind of completely took a different turn to look at intelligences in all their forms. And just to recap, envisioning intelligences, the idea behind it is to look at linguistic, kinesthetic, communication, musical, emotional, and other intelligences by biological and technological life forms, with a focus on collaboration and coordination across life forms and intelligence types, to inspire discussion about existing and future sensors and actuators, memory and reasoning, exploration and communication, plus shared goals and desirable futures. Our last example from the night, this is actually one that we like so much and think that it really showcases the idea of collaboration, which we want to highlight in this upcoming decade. The responsibility visualizing AI for Google DeepMind. We liked it so much that we've put it as part of our slides, as the background for the slides. So thank you to Aurora Mititelu, my guest. It's very nice to have you here. This is a very busy time for everyone, I know. So it's great that you able to take an hour out of your life to join us and to discuss your work, and I'm really looking forward to it. I see that you have a sort of welcome part on your slide, so I'll let you kind of introduce yourself if that's all right, and you can get started whenever you're ready.
Sure. So first of all, yeah, thanks for having me here, Todd. It's great to see your face and
Yeah.
put a face on the email. So thanks
Yeah.
for having me here. Yeah, it's amazing what you're doing and putting together this event and kind of the exhibition and having this decade long. That's crazy. Yeah, so very happy to be part of it. Yeah, I would like to talk more about the project. I'm gonna share my screen and share my slide. Great. So yeah, thanks for introducing me. I'm gonna talk about this project. But the way that I wanted to kind of frame my talk, because I'm gonna talk about this project and about another one, is kind of thinking about computational systems as artistic material, because I think this is a framework that makes sense a lot for a bunch of other projects that I'm doing, and it's more relevant to my practice as a whole. Okay. So in this talk, I'm gonna kind of give a little overview of my practice, talking about computational systems as artistic material. Then I'm gonna go through the first project, Visualizing AI Responsibility for Google DeepMind. Then I'm gonna talk about another project, Able and I, which is a different, kind of a different angle on this topic, but I think it's very relevant as well. And finally, I'm gonna talk about the circulation and impact of this work and how I think kind of art fits within this larger question that the exhibition that you're putting together, yeah, makes sense. So who I am, I'm a Romanian artist based between Los Angeles and Bucharest. I work with computer-generated images, 3D simulations, AI, and physical installations to look at how computational media constructs contemporary reality and how it structures society. My name is Aurora Mititelu. I mentioned this already. I have an MFA in Media Arts from UCLA, where I went as a Fulbright student, and I coordinate the social software lab at UCLA. Right now, I'm in Bucharest, so that's what I did until September, and then I'm gonna start again next year. And that's where I direct the AI Code and Art Summer Institute. So that's an initiative that the lab has, and I'm going to talk about it for a second later. And I'm also a member of the Year 12 Art and Code cohort of the New Ink incubator at the New Museum, which is, yeah, New Museum's cultural incubator in New York. So I'm kind of sitting in between all this, like academia and other types of environments. But at the core, I would say I'm an artist, and I also teach and I organize and coordinate things. But I want to mention social software, the lab that I am part of. So it's a research lab that's hosted in the Design Media Arts department at UCLA, and it's directed by Lauren Lee McCarthy and Casey Reese, who are pioneering artists working with generative art and with AI and with a lot of interesting topics. And the lab itself examines the social impacts and possibilities of making with software. And this is the lab that hosts the AI Code and Art Summer Institute, which we do every summer. This summer is going to be our third year, where we essentially have students that learn about these different topics. And I think the intersection of it is very fascinating to talk about and learn and to see what they make always. Yeah, and other than that, the focus of the lab includes accessible technology, open source communities, AI, data, and generative systems. So yeah, working with art, doing some residencies as well. So for me, when I think about computational technology as systems that structure reality, this is how I frame my art practice. And I think what I mean by that is that I've always been fascinated by the way, there's technology that comes into our lives and then some things change. I think technology has this thing that, this possibility that creates these tensions that make us reconsider how we do certain things or how we think about certain things. And I think that's always kind of a point of possibility, because that's the point where we start to see cracks in things we were sure about. So I think in ways that's why I work at the forefront of technology, or always work with emerging technologies, and I've been doing that for a while. So before I was doing more computer generated images, or I was doing XR, or yeah, I was looking through them and I was like, okay, I'm always working with these new things, because the new things kind of put these pressures that I find interesting within society. And I think I see that in two ways. One is social, so how we communicate, how labor works, governance, so thinking about power and structures, how does new technology kind of restructure and give power to other people within like larger groups. So I always think about society also as a system. And then also personal. I think about the personal also as a system. So I think desire, intimacy, self-image, and kind of this connection between how do you relate to yourself and how do you relate to society, to like a larger thing, as a unit part of this larger system as well. And I put this to social and personal because they make sense with the two projects that I'm gonna talk about later. And I also want to make the point that I think media art is a way that we can embody the cultural moment. And I think specifically media art, because art historically has always been something that is able to articulate what is happening currently in the world, and artists are able to do that. And because of that, I think media art is the medium that kind of has the most impact on how society is right now and how things are changing. And yeah, so I'm really interested in working with these materials because I think they're the materials that also build the world. And these are a few examples of other artists. So Lauren Lee McCarthy, who is the director of the lab, but also John Raffman and Lawrence Leck and Harold Cohen. So artists that I look at, that I get inspired by, that also use computer technology to do art. And I think in my method of working with the systems as material, when I say systems, I think about software, I think about hardware, and also about conceptual systems. So I think my work is usually a mix of all these things. And I always kind of pick and choose, okay, I'm going to work with this software and I'm going to make an installation that has this type of computer. So it's a lot of components that kind of come into it, and usually they get materialized as installations. Sometimes I enter into relationships with them, and I think this is going to become more clear as I start speaking about the project. But I think through this kind of back and forth, you can start to learn more things about the systems you work with, rather than just having them static. Or I think it's because of what I'm saying, that it is media art, I think that gives it this possibility. It's a little different than working with more static materials. And I think I tend to also materialize abstract processes, which is what I was doing with the Google AI project, where there's this kind of abstract idea, and I think I try to put it into form to make it make sense, maybe outside of the more technical realms. So I'm going to start by talking about visualizing AI, which is the first part of how I think about the systems, like the social part mostly. So what is Visualizing AI? It's a Google DeepMind initiative that aims to open up conversations about AI and make it more accessible to the general public. So they commissioned some artists. They had a few sessions, like a bunch of years. And each year they commissioned a few artists to create open source imagery. And this collection included 3D works by world-class creators exploring the roles and responsibilities of AI's impact on society, from robotics and neuroscience to ethics and safety. I assume I don't need to explain who Google DeepMind is, but it's a leading AI research lab, and they were the ones who did the milestone with AlphaGo and all these great things. And yeah, essentially what they were thinking about. So this specific project within Google DeepMind is that popular culture often associates AI with dystopian narratives that exclude the realistic risks and potential rewards of the technology. So kind of having this, I don't know, like mysticized idea of what it is. So their aim was to create this effort to redress this by commissioning artists that creates imagery that is more pointed, or it's more articulates in a better way how AI can impact society. And the way that they did this was, so these were a few of the artists, so it was me and Data Projects and a bunch of different artists you can check out as well. But the way that they did this is that they paired an artist with a scientist. So I was paired with Will Hawkins, which was the responsibility product management lead at Google DeepMind. And then essentially it was like a collaboration where I would meet with the scientists and we would, talk about it. They gave me materials to research, and then I thought about, okay, how do I kind of visualize the research that he has done, and then also look through a few other ideas. It was a project that was very kind of free. So I think Google DeepMind they chose the artist. They knew, okay, you fit with this, and these are the topics that you are gonna get. But then after that, it was really free. Like you could do whatever you wanted in collaboration with the scientist. And the topic I got was human responsibility. And the reason they gave me this topic is because in my work, I kind of mix abstract things and abstract visuals with more representational things. So I do also human renderings and more literal things. So that's why they thought it was going to be a good fit. So I started with the research. I looked through responsibility and data governance. It was a topic that was rather new to me then too. I understood how AI systems work, but I think there was a level of, I didn't know how it works at a corporate level. So that, okay, how does a corporation make decisions? What is the system within that corporation to think about how do you implement AI technology? And of course, kind of diving deeper into how, when I say I mostly mean machine learning at that point, this is what I was working with, how that works, how does data work, where does the human component kind of come in. I also looked at their AI principles. So Google has their own AI principles, which I thought it was interesting type way of kind of, okay, when a company builds these things, then they have some framework of what they want to do and kind of their own ethics that they want to abide by. Now, and then how the AI data enrichment works, which was again kind of a new idea for me at the time that I researched. Looking through all of these different research papers, and for example, here on the lower right is what I was mentioning, kind of how AI deals with responsibility and safety governance when, what is the process that they go through, the assessment, policy, evaluation. If it doesn't pass the evaluation, they go back, and then mitigation, and then finally deployment. So from the things that I had access to. And the core, or one of the main things that I had essentially worked with, is the paper that Will Hawkins, the scientist that I was working with, that he authored together with Brent Mittelstadt, I hope I say that right, which is called The Ethical Ambiguity of AI Data Enrichment, Measuring Gaps in Research Ethics, Norms, and Practices. And that paper looks at AI research that relies on human data enrichment, things like crowdsourcing, labeling, evaluation, or generating training data. And it asks how this kind of research engages with existing research ethics norms. And the paper finds that although AI conferences and journals have started to introduce these guidelines, like the ethics guidelines, the the authors rarely follow or even report on those core ethical practices. So this include like institutional review board oversight, informed consent, payment details, and information about the workers involved. And it's striking because many of these tasks involve humans in ways similar to fields like psychology, where such standards are more routine than in this case. And overall, the paper shows a gap between emerging ethics policies and actual research practice in AI. And it suggests that the field still lacks shared enforceable norms for protecting and recognizing the people whose labor underpins modern model development. So I just wanted to give it an overview of that paper, but essentially what that meant for my part of the work was that machine learning and latent space are usually conceptualized and illustrated as abstract virtual spaces that often overlook the human element. And that is true of what I've seen as well from the type of images that I was looking at when I was learning about it, or when I was kind of looking through this space. So because of that, I chose to represent machine learning as a human-machine system. And I wanted to basically represent people, to emphasize this human component that it's involved in modeling and modifying algorithms and data. So instead of just being fully abstract. 1 second. So then I started to do all this kind of research. Okay, how can I represent humans without being extremely... So how do I kind of live somewhere in between abstraction and being more representational or more literal, right? So I was thinking, okay, I can use hands. Hands are something that are very... that speak so much, even if they're very like human associated, without using faces or without using kind of humans. So kind of finding that balance there. And then I was starting to think about how do I represent data, and I started to think about how these data structures, essentially these representations of data in latent space, where data clusters form by data training. And so I looked through all of these things. And on the right, there are some older kind of particle simulations that I've been doing by myself a long time ago. But kind of finding an in-between type of representation between these two. So then in the middle here, on the lower part, you can see how I was started to think, okay, we could have these hands kind of like shape this data. And, I started doing some drafts, so making some of these particles and trying to think, how do they look like? What colors should I use? This is the designer part and the artist part, and what kind of hands should I use? Of course, when you start representing humans, you start to think about diversity, race, types of hands, and skin color. And I think it was also a period of time that was, I don't know, I found it somehow, okay, I want to make sure that this feels right without, without feeling either exploitative or somehow not inclusive. So I think it's the topic of inclusivity felt like, okay, I have the responsibility to somehow treat this fairly as well, and kind of consider it when I work with it. For data, it was more simple, right? Like it was easier to say, okay, we have this, like in an abstract way, okay, we have this different shapes and different forms that kind of create this these clusters, and that's easier to kind of make a connection. Okay, that's what they represent, even if they're more abstract and they have this more textural quality. And it's something that I do a lot. Some in my work is that okay, even if we start from something technical, then when you get to work with colors, with depth of field, with kind of the simulated camera in a 3D environment, then you can start playing around and create like an atmosphere, and that's the fun part, I think, as well. And then kind of how do I put these two things together? How do I create like a storyboard? How does this story kind of start to make more sense? And so starting kind of with this more unstructured data, like a bunch of particles that they start to form these shapes, and then having the hands kind of touch them and influence them. So these were some early sketches. So I think from the beginning I knew what type of colors I wanted to work with and all of these things. But then I was thinking, okay, how do I express this idea at the core, which is that it's a human machine system? How do I make that kind of make a lot of sense and be clear? And so I tested some animations because I think this is, unfortunately, this video is a little pixelated. Okay, this is better. So I think when you talk about systems, a way to kind of express that better is by the motion. So when you work, again, when you work in 3D, it's not only that you create images, but you have this other dimension of movement and space and motion. So I think that adds a lot to how you can communicate these things. So I started with this. I was like, I really like it in some ways, but I can't use severed hands. That it feels weird. It feels a little grotesque. So, but I did like somehow the idea of humans working in the same way. But then I was like, okay, I have to have it make more sense. And I started with this sketch where they were more intentional and clustered. And that's when I met with Will, the researcher that I was working with, and he was like, okay, I'm not sure if this is working really well because they're reaching up and this feels somehow maybe not right for what we're trying to say. And I think that's the point where I was like, okay, I think what needs to happen is that the hands have to have more agency, or they need to feel like they are actually changing things. They can't just kind of work around. So it was really nice to have this collaboration where we went back and forth a little bit and discussed these things. And it's because sometimes you create something and then someone comes from outside a bit and they can see things that maybe you're stuck on other things making. So that was really nice. So then going back to the drawing board, thinking, okay, how can I make these clusters of hands kind of be more of an agent that actively shapes the data that's part of it, and yeah, essentially kind of communicating that in a better way. So went back to my animating software and did a bunch of things. So this is kind of like the skeletons that I had and how I work with this animation tool. I was using Cinema 4D essentially here, and I had all these things, and then yeah, they move again.
Can I ask you a quick question here with the how were you able to, did you film hand movement to capture how things move, or is like the motion software sophisticated enough that it can just do that? You don't need to see an actual like different hands moving because it's very, I mean, it's very lifelike. It feels very, very natural.
Yeah, I didn't record. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I animated it myself because I have a background as an animator, which I almost forget about now because it's been a while.
Yeah.
But essentially, I animated them by hand, and I had this. I mean, you can see here in this video that you have this like skeletons, and you're
Yeah.
able to position them and like reposition, and you have these like controls. Yeah, so very much like CGI work, very big.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Not Yeah, so I think this is also interesting because I made this work about AI, but we didn't use AI essentially. So we was about
Wow.
this. We used all these different methods, which I think was interesting. But it was also a time where generative AI videos and images were not at the level of precision that they are right now. And I
Mm,
still think that the way that I thought about the project and the way that I worked with it, I think it makes more sense to do it in a 3D software, even if it's way more tedious.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so kind of moving forward from this, like what felt like a challenge, then I thought, okay, then I'm gonna have these hands be way more like like active agents in shaping this. So I
Mm,
started to create these images where that becomes more clear. So like this shot. So again, kind of a good point that you're pointing it out that having this background as an animator, I think I understand I had this intuition of how to work with, how you frame something, how something moves, and how that communicates an idea. And so this is kind of what I was coming towards. So in the end, these are the images that I ended up with. So what I delivered to for the project was a short 13-second video and a four stills. And so this is one of them. This is data inside a kind of latent space. This is a detail of this data. Then we have the image with the hand, and then we have like kind of a bunch of people working inside of this data. So these are all of the four images together, and that kind of also create like a story. And this is the short video. Gonna let it loop. Hopefully it's gonna get a better quality. Yeah, here we go. So I think, yeah, here kind of the challenge was this, how do I make each hand have control over each part and then have all these different types of particles kind of operate. Yeah, so this was the Visualizing AI project. This was the part that I've done. And after I finished it, it was essentially available on Pexels and Unsplash. So these are some platforms that offer open source imagery and videos. And that's where all the artists work, like the other artists also had their work there. And yeah, that was very interesting. It was, I think, early 2024 that I finished this project. So yeah, so that's this part, and then I'm gonna go to the second project, which is called Abel and I, and kind of talks about this other part of using computational technology as a system that structures reality, about personal desire, intimacy, and like, self-image. And here, and also I think that's a good point to mention. Both the project for Google and this are part of my independent practice. Even like I work with research labs, I work with other things, but these were kind of my independent projects created outside of these frameworks. And the art practice that I kind of developed out of my MFA when I was at UCLA is a work that investigates computer images as a new form of representation of reality and how they circulate and structure power within society. So specifically more focused on images here. And when I say computer images, kind of that was my thesis that I've been writing towards the end, was how photography and CGI and generative AI kind of merging into this new type of image, which is a computer image. Because I was very fascinated by the way that we use image to represent reality, and they have, a role in how we think about trust and reliability. So they have this very core function within society. And because of generative AI, there becomes a tension that, okay, we can't really, like it fractures the trust that was essential to photography. So I wanted to look at how these new types of images, how do they operate in the world and how do they work? So that was my theoretical writing, which I'm not including in this presentation, but it's also the backbone of how I started to think about some of my material and artistic work, which is, for example, Meta Mahala, where I merge these three types of making images to construct a male avatar version of myself that is positioned in Eastern Europe. So in this work, it's a sculpture and it's a textile print. And in the print, I essentially merged photography, a picture taken in Bucharest, where I'm from, and then a CGI component, which is the avatar mostly. It's a 3D avatar. And then doing a lot of modification using generative AI. So kind of, I think this is the most visible here on the back of the work. And this was kind of layered onto this physical structure. Sorry. And had this carpet. And this item essentially makes a lot of sense in Eastern Europe because it's an installation that symbolizes a carpet. It's a carpet cleaning bar, which is a common utilitarian object situated between block buildings in working class neighborhoods in Eastern Europe. And it's kind of an iconic object which has historically functioned as a communal space where diverse social groups would gather. So essentially that's where the family would like clean the carpets, but it's also where children would play. And I think it was, again, thinking about society and like social spaces and how images circulate within society. I thought it was an interesting kind of abstract metaphor to work with this object. But coming back, essentially, what I continued working with from this project. So this is the beginning of working with Abel, which is a character that started to be present in multiple works in Genesis and in Abel and I a little later. I thought it was very interesting to think again about representation of using CGI to represent gender, to represent power. And so I started this series, which is one of the works is called Genesis, and it's portraying my relationship with Abel, which is the synthetic version of myself, through a blend of these three methods. Materialized again as a textile print. And I was thinking about also the title of the work, which fractures the word genesis from the root gene. That is also shared with generative and gender, so alluding to themes of birth production or creation, but also thinking about generative AI at that time, which was very present. So also, again, kind of using AI, imagery, and CGI and photography to put this all together. And where I want to land with is this piece, Abel and I, which is an interactive simulation that allows visitors to talk to Abel by texting him from my phone. The virtual car and the physical bed in this installation mirror each other to kind of create a discussion around physicality and virtuality and around how images kind of fold into reality and how into well, I actually consider images also part of reality, but into physicality. And I think this is an interesting example, kind of continuing from the point that I was making before, of visualizing a form of intelligence or creating this presence in this installation where you are able to text a large language model, essentially, that I trained specifically on. Actually, I further trained on a few texts that I had, so from my own kind of data, but based on a base large language model, but kind of embodying that and putting that into space and having a physical digital presence be there with you. I think it was kind of special, and for visitors to be able to, okay, text, which is a human interaction with, it's an interaction we have with other humans and we're very used to it, but having that on the phone with a large language model, so like with an AI system, then it created this eerie feeling, I think, of, okay, I text, I see him, he texts me back, and then I get this message. So kind of embodying an intelligence, visualizing and embodying that, I think was something that I found fascinating to work with. So this is a kind of a short video that shows how the installation works. And yeah, that's the texting and text back. And it was a very interesting work to create because I spent a lot of time kind of designing the characters. I spent a lot of time tweaking what kind of person I wanted to be and what kind of, what kind of character is he? How does he talk? How does he? And what I found hard to work with was that a lot of these agents are they're made to be very nice and very pleasing and supportive and helpful. And I think the type of character that I was going for wasn't like that. So it was very hard to kind of work with already packaged large language models, but training one from scratch would have been I don't know if that would have given a better result in some ways. So it was a lot of kind of trade works in working with this. So yeah, this talks a bit about how I made that, and then also some archive of these texts were printed on textile bows that were attached to this bed, and that's again kind of thinking about how digital materials become physical and become part of our lives in this abstract way. Yeah, and then so the last part is talking about circulation and impact. So the work, both of them, circulated across cultural institutions and exhibitions, corporate and research contexts, open source libraries, press, online platforms, and blogs. And I think they were able to kind of sit in between these worlds and reach audiences beyond kind of art, tech, or academia, or kind of floating between them. So I think I find art a very interesting mode of engagement when working with technological, academic, and all these types of texts and ideas, because it really, I think by giving form to these things, it's a unique way to communicate and engage with these ideas. So this is kind of the exhibition history of this work. So it's been shown in Bucharest, in Czech Republic, New York, LA, and now it's going to travel with the Envisioning Intelligence exhibition, the one with responsibility AI for Google DeepMind. This is a few places where the work got in press. So Abel and I, it was in Liberation France, in Neural magazine, and it was also on Canal Plus in France, which is an international TV station. I think they were talking about AI emotions and experiences. And also, Abel and I got into this research paper that's called Who Am I Talking To? Critical Reflections on Socially Interactive Agents in Current Media Art. And it's co-authored by Maya Stark, Dagmar Schurer, and Andrea Knaut. They are all from Berlin. And in this paper, they examine how media artists work with socially interactive agents to reflect on intimacy, power, and human-machine relationships. So through works by Stephanie Dickens, Martine Sims, Lorraine McCarthy, Elena Knox, and my own work, Abel and I, the authors show how artists use, adapt, and sometimes fake intelligent systems to challenge expectations around care, gender, agency, and responsibility. So rather than proposing better AI systems, these artworks surface blind spots in how intelligence is imagined and felt, demonstrating how artistic practice can contribute uniquely to cultural and social understanding of AI. So kind of, I guess, making the point that I was also trying to make, but I think it's also interesting to think about how sometimes in my work, I start with research papers and end up with creating visuals. Sometimes I create an artwork and the artwork is part of a research paper. So it's very, yeah, I really appreciate kind of having ties and being around academia and understanding what the borders of this is. So these are a few images from the research paper that I mentioned. A lot of other like artists I really respect, and I feel humbled to be part of this list. And the same I think for Google DeepMind for visualizing AI. So I think because it was an open source library, the role of it was that people can take the images and use them in their own articles, for their own use. So I had, people email me, say, hey, thank you for these images. I'm using them for this thing. And it's great to see that. It's great that they can circulate. So these are a few of the places where people used the images. And so from Unsplash and Pexel, so the two platforms that they were available in, they had like over 2 million views and a lot of downloads. So hopefully people made good use of them. It's really nice to be able to see kind of, your work circulate. So in summary, I think that I enjoy working with systems as form. So I create these methods inside each project, engage. So the methods that I create inside each project engage with software, hardware, and conceptual systems. I have these things, these systems are relational. I interact with them, I adapt them, and let them respond. And I would say they're relational also in the sense that there's always a public, there's always collaborators that I work with. And by visualizing them, I give them form. I give form to how computational technologies shape perception, behavior, and intimacy in contemporary life. So these systems become visceral, intuitive, and sensorial, even when they originate in technical or intellectual ground. And I think this sensorial accessibility allows the work to circulate widely and articulate the contemporary moment across institutions, audiences, and platforms. So thank you. That's the end of my slides. 40 minutes. That's not too bad.
Thank you so much. Yes, if you have a question for Aurora, please type it into the Q&A or the chat. I was curious, did Abel, I know you said that um, the uh, ChatGPT or the what you were using was tended to have answers that were very nice or very polite. Did Abel develop a sort of personality that you could recognize or that was in some way consistent, or did you feel yourself wanting to project a consistent personality on this construct? What can you tell me more about just the way that you interacted and began to think about this person, this thing that you created?
So your question is kind of pointed towards did he in fact was able to kind of create this personality, or is it more projecting?
Yeah, like how did that work? It
Yeah,
seems like it was like both would be kind of intention, but
yeah, yeah. I think both are true.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think, yeah, definitely. Um, Yes, it was a struggle also to work with the systems, right, with the different LLM models. And what I ended up doing is that I went further, like using older models of like
mm,
ChatGPT because they were less censored and less trained to be like very nice, and they only
yeah,
saw things that are very helpful, which is, I guess, they're better in terms of what they need, but they were making it worse in terms of what I was needing. Um, and I think it was, I was able to have it be more consistent as long as I was interacting with it, because I learned also better how do you prompt it, how do you frame it, how do you do this and that. But having it in an open space where visitors can come interact with it, it was going in all these directions much easier.
yeah,
So I think it definitely made me realize, yeah, that's an interesting request, right? Like, how do you create an AI agent that is way more strict in what it wants to do? But it's hard to, because you want it to be strict, but then you also want it to be able to kind of respond to all these things that people would ask it. So
yeah.
I would say that was a struggle for sure. It was like a back and forth, and definitely projecting to for me, definitely.
Yeah, my son and I were just goofing around a few months ago with ChatGPT and just trying to put in a question or a scenario that was so ridiculous that we would kind of force it to be somewhat of a jerk to us. And it was really hard to get them to be like that. And especially just the idea of feeling grandiose about your ideas. I mean, we were putting in just these ridiculous ideas, and no matter how bad they were, it was sort of like how I used to grade papers, like you start off with, effusive praise and then get to write really well because you don't want to hammer someone over the head like this is terrible. But so those what the responses were. And, it seemed like it was a sort of stable thing, but it was actually just kind of mirroring, just mirroring what we were asking it at the moment, whatever direction we would take it in. So it's
Mm.
interesting to me, like how that whole project of Abel and I just is really interesting. in that because we see people are developing real, attachments to
Yeah.
this and having some psychological effects. So I think it's really relevant. When I was looking at the installation for Able, and I just coming from a exhibit curator perspective, like every new thing that you add is kind of another logistic headache. Do you relish that? When you put together and maybe make the decision between doing a print or doing an installation or an interactive where you're inviting people to pick something up and um, do you relish those types of challenges, or are they kind of like, I don't know what I got into, or how does that work?
I love this question. Yeah, it's definitely um I think when I made the work, I didn't think about logistics because I was like, okay, I want to make things that are, like things that I've never seen before, things that I find challenging technically. But then, of course, when you make you make it challenging technically, that's the thing that you have to do every time you exhibit it. So definitely, I think the times when I have it exhibited again, and I've done it recently here in Bucharest for Strata Modul, which is a gallery, and it's also a commercial gallery. So in the past, I've worked with places that I think were more focused on media art, so therefore I think they had more infrastructure to work with this. But the more you go more into the art world that's not in the media art world, I think the more challenges you have working with these types of work, with these types of kind of technology. And yes, every part was a logistical like not I wouldn't say nightmare. I think in the end it's you have a list of instructions, you have all these things, but you have all these layers. Definitely there's physical objects, there's projection mapping, there is a computer that has to work via the internet, there's this like so the visual is made in Unreal, so like a game engine that has to work on a PC, and it has to have this like other script that runs the phone, and then the phone has to be kind of locked. So I discovered this that you can lock a phone so visitors cannot go into other places, like they cannot change settings or so. Yes, a lot of things, but it really made me, from a logistical point of view, think of if I make work like this, I think I need to package it in some way that when you show it is not so demanding.
Mm.
From it doesn't need to be produced with so much. But on the other hand, you don't want to. If I just show prints, then that's less interesting.
Exactly.
So there's always kind
Yeah.
of a give and take, I think, here with with this type of work. Have you had similar experiences with
Well,
with
I mean, we're thinking about kind of how to best exhibit the works in this new, because before it was static maps, which we could hang on a wall, interactive visualizations, which we put on a touch screen. It was large enough people could gather around and sort of collaborate on stuff. And this, it could, it might be movies, it might be installations. We're not putting, it has to be, this particular form. And so we're just thinking of, and one of the curators mentioned having like a tent that people could go into as a space or something like that. And then I was at the MIT museum and saw they had these little like sleep chambers that were kind of like these cocoon type of things that you'd get into. And and I'm thinking, oh my God, what if you have someone who gets in there and doesn't come out? Like I was thinking about the things that have nothing to do with the but just like all of these things. So yes, I'm kind of aware. Whenever I see something, I'm like, oh, how did they get that out? Did they get a lot of calls? So yeah, it is something I'm interested in. Um, for your
yeah.
own work, I'm just kind of I'm curious about you wear a lot of hats. You're a teacher and director and artist, and you're part of a art group or co-op type of situation. And how do those, if you were to think of those as kind of different types of intelligences, because I imagine they demand different things from you. Um, do you how do those collaborate to inform your artwork? I mean, I think some of it you've talked about, but is there a way that those kind of work together to uh, make you a better artist or a richer artist than you would if you just did art full time or
Mm.
that makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think definitely being part of I think they inform each other for sure. Being part of especially of the research lab, the social software at UCLA, I really also have to thank like Casey Rees and Lauren D. McCarthy for they were my professors, and then I continued working in the lab. But I think they helped me a lot to start thinking more clearly about the work that I was doing as well. So I
Mm,
think the continuation of being and I think they're also very good at creating community around them. And there's this community of artists in LA, partly through them and partly through other people doing media art, where I found very rich in kind of conceptual thinking, but also this like material explorations. So I think that is definitely helping. I mean, doing all these things is a lot of work, definitely. So
yeah.
I think that's why I'm right now in a period where I'm trying to figure out how do I kind of negotiate my time enough so I can do all these things well, because I also want to
Hmm.
do all of them well.
Hmm.
And then I think with teaching um, is because I'm teaching on the same subject that I also work in, when I show things to students, then it's things that I already look at, or, I research by myself anyway. And so I think they inform each other, but definitely it's not easy to kind of like switch between all
Yeah.
these contexts, and I'm sure you probably understand that. And
Yeah.
having kind of, I guess, working in academia, but also outside of academia, you have to kind of code switch all the time and understand how it works. But I find it very. I think it's what I'm interested in. So in the end, and it's
Yeah.
exciting to be able to do this, and yeah, I'm happy to be able to do the work that I do.
Yeah. Was there any see you made the responsibility was open for people to use. Were there any uses of it that you saw that were surprising, or you thought maybe, ooh, I wouldn't use it that way, or like, oh, that makes me rethink my own piece in a certain way, or were they pretty much used in a way that didn't surprise you at all?
I think the uses that I've seen online didn't surprise me, but what I did find funny, I think it's that the platforms themselves, I don't remember which one, Pexels or Unsplash, on one of them, I think it's somehow like the images that they have there get automatic labels, and one of them was like a hand reaching into a pile of seeds. And I was like, no, data.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's when you work with abstraction, yeah, that's some of the pitfalls of, that you work
Yeah.
with. But I think essentially that was like a label that was automated, and I was like, no, no, no. Even though it also had the text that I wrote, but that's what it looks like to an AI. It looks essentially.
Right.
So it categorized itself.
Yeah, exactly.
It
So,
makes no sense. Yeah.
yeah, that I mean, yeah, you mentioned towards the beginning just kind of like media art as a way to embody the cultural moment, and I'm just how do when you create stuff, thinking about how can I capture something that's particularly pressing right now to me or to culture, um, and how much do you think of just like, well, what will the long term life of this project be? Is it enough to just kind of in a very provocative, interesting way capture that moment and the technologies of the time? Um, does that also sit in tension with, how will this look 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Or does that not even enter into the equation when you're creating things?
Mm. Um, yeah, that's an interesting. So, like, kind of thinking in between a more timeless kind of.
Hmm.
Um, I think because of what I mentioned of there's these moments that I find that because there's a shift in like technology enters in, when LLMs, so like when large language models became widespread, then all these things started to happen very fast and everyone was like talking about it because it was scary. So I think these points of rupture somehow, I think these feel very uh fascinating to me and just naturally I'm like, oh wow, what does it mean, like isn't
Yeah.
it crazy that, and why do we talk about it, and why, why does society kind of react like this, so I'm not sure if I think there is an overarching thesis of my work that can incorporate these points and still kind of make sense
Hmm.
across time. I hope this is a good
Hmm.
answer, but that's how
Yeah.
I understand your question. But I think it's a good question, so it got me thinking.
Definitely. Well, it's been so fun to talk to you. I really appreciated this behind the scenes tour of your work and some insight into how it gets made and the interests and concerns that you have as you're making it. I'll tell you, after seeing Responsibility and then having a chance to read the paper, it is the term ghost workers just seems very very haunting and depressing. Um, and I think that responsibility does seem like an ethical imperative to not let these be invisible. And so I think it works very well on a number of levels. So thanks for making it, and thanks for joining us tonight. And you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with the rest of the presentations. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye. So we are going to.